My name is Emma. I'm a creative writing student studying prose and poetry, and today I want to talk a little bit about one of my favorite kinds of poetry, which is ekphrastic poetry. So the defining feature of ekphrastic poetry is that it uses something called ekphrasis, which, if that sounds like a little bit of a weird word, is actually because we get it all the way back from ancient Greece. And the J. Paul Getty Museum defines ekphrasis as the skill of describing a thing with vivid detail. Now, in the modern day, this has come to be mostly associated with a kind of poetry that describes something, usually an art object. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that could entail, but just know that it could be any kind of art object. There's very little limitation on what counts in that regard. One of the most well-known examples of ekphrastic poetry is John Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn, in which he poetically describes this urn and the carved scenes on it, as well as the historical value and beauty that it continues to hold all the way into the present. So this is not a requirement of ekphrastic poetry, but many of them do comment on sort of the past creative value of the art object, as well as how it has continued to affect people into the present, and will continue to affect into the future. In the final stanza of the poem, Keats writes, "O Attic shape, fair attitude, with braid of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity, cold pastoral, when old age shall this generation waste. Thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou say'st, beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know." So we can see in this poem the beginnings of sort of the ekphrastic tendency to take an art object that has had some kind of cultural value in the past and sort of intermingle it with a present understanding of the cultural or emotional value of that poem and what it can do to sort of bring us from a past art object into the present. To explore a more recent example of ekphrastic poetry, I'll turn to Natalie Diaz's The Facts of Art, in which she uses a woven Hopi basket as a branching off point into a story about the relationship between members of the Native American Hopi tribe and the white organizations that are kind of overtaking their land, and how those tensions intensify after the discovery of a mass burial site. And the baskets in this poem, while being an art object in themselves, also symbolize the relationship between these two groups of people and kind of the breakdown in communication and relationship that's happened there. So Diaz writes, "As dawn festered on the horizon, state workers scaled the mesas, knocked at the doors of pueblos that had them, hollered into those without them, demanding the Hopi men come back to work, then begging them, then buying them whiskey, begging again, finally sending their white wives up the dangerous trail etched into the steep sides to buy baskets from Hopi wives and grandmothers as a sign of treaty." So as later parts of the poem go into, that treaty ends up being kind of a false cooperation on the part of the white workers. But we do see how the historical significance of the basket takes on further cultural significance and kind of emotional significance in the modern day. Now that we've seen a couple examples of how ekphrastic poetry might operate, let's go into what kind of art this can actually be about. One of my favorite aspects of ekphrastic poetry is that you can make ekphrastic poetry out of anything. If it is an art piece that speaks creatively to you or speaks emotionally to you or speaks in a historical or cultural sense to you, you can make ekphrastic poetry out of it. As Maggie Queenie writes for the Poetry Foundation, ekphrastic art can involve painting, photography, architecture, sculpture, landscaping, tapestry, plays, videos, music, installation art, and so many other things. If you can think of a kind of art, you can write an ekphrastic poem about it. And even for those who aren't frequenting art galleries and watching highbrow movies, you can find inspiration for ekphrastic poetry anywhere. It could be a mural or a piece of street art that you pass every day, or your favorite song or the album cover, or a show that really inspires you, or the weather outside, or a post on social media, or even, as silly as it is, a package design that you really like. You don't need to be a master poet to create an ekphrastic poem. You just have to be a person who finds something special to you or finds something inspiring and creates something out of it. You're taking the original inspiration that the artist had and creating something new off of it and adding your own inspiration into that mix. I'm going to share some quick steps on how to make your own ekphrastic poem, and I encourage you to follow along, and then I'll share an example of what I've done with the medium. So the first thing you want to do is you want to find a subject. I would suggest just taking a walk outside until something colorful or interesting or meaningful catches your attention. But if you'd like, you can also go online. There's a lot of art databases and museum collections available online, and you can browse until something catches your eye. The Getty Museum for sure has a great online collection. I've linked that down below if you want to take a look. So once you have an idea of what you want to write about, the next step is to describe it in a list. This doesn't have to be poetic yet. It doesn't have to be perfectly curated yet. Just make a list of all the ways that you could describe it, no matter how insignificant. So think about how it looks or sounds, what you think is happening in the art piece, and ask yourself how it made you feel or what it made you think about. How would you explain this art to someone who has no idea what it is? Once you've got your list, then convert it into a poem. Poeticize it. Some of the things that I like to focus on when I'm trying to write a poem are imagery. So go to your senses and think about your sight, your sound, your smell, your taste, and your touch. How can you describe those? Think about your rhythm. Maybe vary some syllables, vary some line lengths, and kind of play until it sounds musical or it sounds interesting. I also like to try defamiliarizing the descriptions. So try to go past the first description that you think of and kind of the most basic, and think about how you could say something in a little bit more of a bizarre way or a little bit more of an interesting way. Now, as kind of a bonus step for those of you who want to take this leap, go ahead and try to break a little bit from your description of the art object and bring in a little bit something deeper. Expand on the description that you've already created and think about how this art piece or your poem relates to your own life or to a larger event. What kind of mood can you add to color how the poem sounds emotionally? What else does the art piece remind you of that you want to add to the poem? Now, if you followed all those steps and you have a finished poem, go ahead and be brave and share it in the comments. I'd love to read whatever you've written. Don't worry, I'll go first. So my ekphrastic poem is based on this painting. This is Le Jardin de Monet à Vautoy, and it was painted in 1881 by Claude Monet. So what I did with my poem is I looked at this painting, I wrote kind of my poeticized description of this, and then I thought about what else from my life I could bring into it. So I saw the child in the middle, I saw beautiful summer day with sunflowers, and it reminded me of my younger sister. So I wrote a poem about that. It's called Ma Sœur des Tournesols, or My Sister of the Sunflowers. A child skips straight through the sun and sips June days like lemonade, beneath the yellow nodding heads that sprawl their dappled shadows wide. The leaves fan out in earnest, always growing, ever curious, and burst and blossom in the light, much like their newfound human friend. Fargon or cottage comforts traded for the garden's transience. I'm there if you know where to look. I haunt the stairs a world away. When I say don't forget me, what I really mean is don't grow up, and roam so far that I misplace your bobbing head among the blooms. Don't let the summer pale me into somber sun-bleached memory, and usher in the winter wind to whisper icy cold farewells. How strange to find my outlook now obstructed by these slanting stems, their browning heads encroaching as they wilt their colors clean away. How strange to dally on the path while you go frolicking ahead. How strange to be my sister's keeper, separated garden-wide. How strange to see this woman sprouting from the seedling I once knew, the you I loved when you were still no bigger than a gleaming pearl. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a lot about ekphrastic poetry, and I'm excited to see your poems in the comments. I'm putting a list of my references and some additional resources in the description if you'd like to learn more or read some more beautiful examples from other poets. So stay creative and have a good one!